So what is the ego, and should we kill it or hug it? So we often hear people say that, he's got a big ego, or she's got a big ego, or that's really flattering my ego, which shows that subconsciously people are aware that the ego is a separate entity. And what is it that can reflect on that has awareness of that separate entity? Well, that is consciousness, that is awareness, that is the true soul self. So as you start to become conscious, you can realize that you can reflect up on the ego, and you can realize then that the ego is not the true self. It's what I refer to as the false self. The ego is the part of us that has been programmed since birth. So we come into these physical vessels, soul comes into the physical vessels to merge with the brain, with all of the technology, the divine instrument that we use in order to experience ourselves in physicality, and we create an ego. We create a programmed self in order to experience separation consciousness, so in order to experience many different perspectives, so that we can assist source, which we are a part of, which we are fully connected to, which we come from, to assist source in expanding and growing. So we are bringing experiences through our individual experiences. We then share those experiences back with the unified field. But as we come into this incarnation and we are not aware from that, we forget our true self. We have amnesia about all of our soul memories, all of the lives that we have lived, all of the many lives that we exist on at one time, because we exist in many different dimensions, because we are multidimensional. But as we come into this reality, our ego is being programmed from birth, and it's being programmed through culture, religion, school, media, anything you can think of. It is being programmed from our families. And the ego self, so the way that the ego is programmed, the way that we are programmed is through repetition and through emotion. So for example, when you think about when you were a child and you start to learn to walk, once you've done it a few times, boom, it's a program. Now when you get up, you don't think about how to walk, you don't think about how to get dressed, brush your teeth, make your breakfast. You don't even think about if you drive. You don't even have to consciously think how to drive. Often us drivers will be aware that we've had experiences where we've driven from A to B and we don't remember the drive because the subconscious has been programmed and it takes over. The other way that it is programmed is through emotion as well. So we can experience one strong emotion, and if that emotion is strong enough, then it creates an instant program in the mind. So let's say as a child you touch a hot stove, boom, it's going to be extremely painful. It's going to create a strong emotion, and then you're going to have a program in the mind that takes a picture of that stove and connects that stove to that feeling of pain. And then because the ego wants to protect you, wants to make sure that you survive on this planet, then it's gonna do everything it can to move you away from that. So when you see a hot stove in future, it's gonna in your body's consciousness is gonna resist you do. It's gonna stop you from doing that again. So the ego, it's not bad and it is not wrong. Like I say, it has been there really to allow us to experience ourselves in the physical and to experience a new kind of consciousness, a separation consciousness, because usually from our true state, our soul self state, we know that we are connected, we are unified, we are part of source. So in separation consciousness, we can experience different perspectives, and therefore we can learn and grow in ways that we couldn't learn and grow in as a unified field. So the ego's not bad, it always wants to protect us. The challenge with the ego, with what we have been experiencing, is that it is being programmed purposely by a control system, by a dark force that has that has imprisoned the soul, that has imprisoned the planet for thousands of years, that has kept us in fear. So it's been programmed through fear, through violence, programmed to believe it's not enough. So the common consciousness viruses that have been inserted through artificial means, through things like the TV, mind control, that's been inserted into through wars, through keeping us in constant violence and fear, how that has been inserted into our consciousness has created a virus in the consciousness. The main ones are not enoughness, lack, fear, just feeling like it's difficult just to survive. So it's kept us in a very low frequency of consciousness, which has not allowed us to go inwards and explore the truth of who we are. In fact, everything has been programmed to keep us outside of the self, distracted, thinking that, you know, materiality is what matters. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't have things, but that is not fulfillment, and that's not going to lead us to the truth of who we are. And if we don't connect to the true self, which is the soul, which is energy, consciousness, which is divine source, if we don't connect to that, then we're going to live a life that is directed by subconscious patterns of fear and lack. So we're not going to fulfill our destinies. We're not going to live a life of our highest expression. You know, our soul self, the totality of the soul self, has a blueprint for us. And right now we are going through a gateway, a time when we are starting to ascend in consciousness. So the ego that's being programmed with fear has helped us to descend, to fall in consciousness, to keep us trapped in this, what feels like a prison cell. Well, it's a prison cell that most of us didn't even realize that we were in, because the world around us has been normalized. War has been normalized. Scarcity has been normalized. And that is not normal. That is the false matrix. So that is not the organic way which we are moving into. So the ego, it's not bad, it's not wrong, it just wants to help us, but it's been really programmed in a way to not like the self, to feel that the self is bad, is wrong, is dirty, and in that it's created a lot of fear, and it's created a lot of limitations, and it's stopped us from connecting to the self. In fact, the higher aspects of the self, the true soul self, is ridiculed in this society. So what we actually need to do with the ego, so the ego's been in the driving seat because the soul's been blocked out, not being heard by many people are distracted. What we need to do is not kill the ego. You can't kill the ego. It's not bad, it's not wrong, it's just acting in a way that it's been programmed. So we have to start to see that the ego is not the true self, and we have to start to reparent the ego. We have to start to look at the ego with care, with love, with compassion, with patience, with understanding. And we need to almost see, you can almost see it as the ego is the wounded self. It's the self that carries all of the trauma, all of the wounds, and every single person that is born into this false matrix is wounded, has got trauma, whether you are conscious of it or not, because those are the viruses within our society. So we need to start to reparent the ego. We need to start to realize we can observe it. The observer is the true self. We are the experiencer, we are source, we are consciousness, and we start to treat it as we would perhaps a small child. So imagine if you've got a small child, and that small child is, you can treat the small child in two ways. You can treat it with care, you can treat it with love, you can treat it with nurture, you can treat it with kindness. Kindness is key. Care, kindness, compassion. Or you can be critical, you can be judgmental, you can be harsh, you can be just not very nice to it. How is that small child going to grow? It's going to wither up inside. It's going to start to withdraw. It's going to start to feel many negative things about itself. It's going to start to believe that is the truth, which is not the truth. And it's going to really create a difficult experience for the child. So the child's not going to grow, flourish. So that is the same with the self. Imagine You know, so many people talk to themselves in such negative ways and they don't even realise it's because we've been programmed to believe we are not good enough. So we think it's normal to speak to us. Like it's subconscious, it's just a program. But we have to start becoming aware of it and challenging that program because it's not true. And we have to start being kind to ourselves. So we have to start, so when we get those negative thoughts that tell us that we're not good enough, we have to recognise that that's not truth. That's the programmed self. And we can tell that programmed self, no, you are enough. You are enough and I love you. And we can say it if we want to, but we don't have to say it. We just need to think it in our mind. We just need to catch ourselves, become aware when we are talking negatively to ourselves and start to bring in more balance, more kindness. Now it takes energy and effort at first because the way the subconscious works, the brain works, when it's been programmed, well then it's created a program through repetition, through emotion, then it's a habit, right? It runs automatically in order to conserve energy, but these negative ones don't conserve energy, it drains energy. We have to start using effort and awareness at first to start to, imagine it's an energy, right? We've created this energy and we've put all of this intention behind this energy, we put all this focus behind these negative beliefs, thoughts about ourselves, and that energy is moving fast. So we can't just stop it, it's gonna be hard, right? We can start to do it slowly. We start becoming aware and we start to change the narrative inside our mind. We start to change that. We start to have more care, compassion, patience, and then we start to slow down that energy. And over time, the way we think and feel about ourselves starts to shift. And as we start to think and feel about ourselves with care, compassion, love, understanding, then not only does that allow us to create a new relationship with the ego, so the ego then becomes the assistant of the soul. The soul moves into the driver's seat because the soul is care, compassion and unconditional love. So the soul then moves in fully, and when the soul is driving your life, the ego is still around and you will still recognize the ego, and sometimes it will still come up with those negative programs, but you'll be able to just sort of recognize it, smile at it, have care for it, and just allow those thoughts to drift on by. They won't direct your life. The soul will direct your life, and once the soul is in charge, well boy, you are in the sweet spot. You are now co-creating with life from consciousness rather than from unconsciousness. So unconsciousness is the inversion of consciousness. It is the spiral away from light, from source, from truth. It is being in unawareness. You know, obviously we need to have compassion for ourselves because there have been things that we have done, all of us in this life, in past lives, in many lives, that we will have done that will have hurt another, hurt ourselves, betrayed others due to unconscious programming and patterning. But as soon as we become aware, we can make better choices and we can have compassion for that part of us because it's not bad and it's not wrong. It was responding in a way of needing to protect itself. So as we move into soul, we don't need to be defensive anymore about everything. You know, I recognise now, I've been on this journey consciously for quite a long time, and I started to realise all these negative things I would say about myself, and I started to change that. I started to retrain the ego, the mind, and it's really opened up so many opportunities, avenues. It's, you know, moving into soul alignment, and it's not that there isn't any challenges in life, but those challenges are just different, easier, it's more flow. It's more ease, but I'm still aware that there are parts of me that are some shadows, some corruption inside that still needs cleansing, and I'm still on that inner journey, and we're always on that inner journey. The destiny of the soul is to awaken and come back to truth, back to its pure soul, undistorted source self. But in that, you know, I can recognize that I can be with people, friends and stuff, and you know, I can recognize a conversation coming up in my mind that is defending myself for something that hasn't even happened. And I recognize that, and I can smile and laugh at that sometimes and think, okay, that's just the ego, that's just the programmed, wounded self. And I can just smile and I can just let it know inside myself, it's fine, everything's fine, you are safe, you are loved. And I can just say that in my heart, and then I can just let it go. So we can recognize those and just love it. So hopefully that gives you a little bit more insight into what the ego is. It's not the true self, but it is a part of us that we have created to experience different perspectives. But It has been hijacked, it has been manipulated by the control system, which understands this about us, has tried to keep us from recognizing that. But we are now in the Great Awakening, and we are remembering, because all information is within us. We just have to have the courage to go in and do our inner work to cleanse our templates out, and that work is exciting. It's fun to start discovering the truth about the self, and you are going to discover so many lies that we have been told. And sometimes when I first started to discover a lot of these lies, I felt a lot of anger, and that's okay, that's fine. Anger's not bad. It's only a problem when we are projecting it onto others rather than allowing ourselves to process it. So we have to relearn what it means to be a human, what it means to be a multidimensional being having a human experience. We need to relearn that, because we are not taught that, but it is fun relearning that, and we learn how to process our emotions, and we learn how to master our mind. That is what I do. That is what I moved into. You know, I worked 22 years in finance, and I knew inside myself that this was not what I was meant to do. This was not my heart space. This was my ego that was run by fear, that needed to have a certain amount of money in order to, because when I grew up, my parents didn't have a lot of money. They were always stressed, upset about money, and I didn't want it to be like that. I wanted to be able to help them. So, but I knew that in my heart that's not what I wanted to do, and I started to follow my heart. I started to go on that inner journey deeply, and there was many things that happened in my life that triggered that going inwards. Often it's crisis that triggers us going really deep inward, but as we do, we start to do that work. So I learned how to master the mind. I learned how to process emotions, to remove trauma and density from my divine vessel, my divine body. I learned how to connect to my higher aspects, to bring more soul and light into the body. Right now you can see I'm in the most beautiful place, and you know that when you are in a beautiful place, you feel good. You feel the light, you feel the cleansing. Now imagine feeling that from the inside. Imagine that running through every cell of your body. And that's what starts to happen as we connect to the true self, as we do the inner work, and as we dissolve all that is not us, the false self, the false beliefs about the self, and it gets basically transmuted, alchemized by the light.